The war had ended, but the smell of smoke and fear still filled the air. Cities stood broken, and people carried scars they could not hide. The humans had won the long fight against the alien race. A victory written in blood and sacrifice. Among the heroes of this war stood Commander James Rylan. He was not the strongest man, not the loudest voice. But he was brave when it mattered. He had led his squad through fire and death. And he had saved lives when hope was gone. Now the Council of Earth called his name. Crowds gathered in the Great Hall, cheering for their hero. But James did not smile. He was tired, and the weight of war pressed heavy on his shoulders. The council leader raised his voice. "Commander James Rylan," he said, "for your courage, for your loyalty, for your victory, we grant you a reward." At first, James thought it would be a medal, or land, or some title he did not care about. But when the soldiers dragged the reward forward, silence filled the hall. It was a woman, an alien woman chained at her wrists and ankles. Her skin was pale silver, her hair dark like the void between stars. She walked slowly, her head bowed, her body covered in scars from war and chains. The crowd began to laugh. Some clapped, some whispered, "A slave." They gave him a slave. James felt his chest tighten. This was not honor. This was shame. He believed in freedom. He fought for it. And now they handed him chains. The woman lifted her head just once, and in that single moment, James saw her eyes. They glowed faintly, like two pieces of broken moonlight. For a second, he forgot where he was. Her gaze was sharp, but also tired, as if she carried a truth no one else could see. The council leader smiled coldly. "She is yours now, Commander, a token of victory. Do with her as you wish." The chains rattled as the guards pushed her toward him. James did not move. His hand twitched at his side. But he took the chain anyway. He could not protest in front of everyone. Not now. The hall roared with laughter and cheers. But James felt only silence inside his heart. That night, James returned to his quarters with the alien woman following close. Her steps were quiet, yet every sound of the chain burned into his ears. He placed the chain on the floor and spoke. "You are free here," he said softly. "No one will hurt you." But she did not answer. She only sat in the corner, her knees pulled close, her eyes watching him without blinking. James sighed. He poured water into a cup and placed it near her. She did not touch it. He gave her food, but she did not eat. It was as if she lived in another world, a world of silence and shadow. That night, James tried to sleep, but dreams came to him like fire. He saw battles he had never fought, burning skies and great towers of light. He woke in sweat, his chest heavy, and when he looked, she was still, sitting there, her glowing eyes on him. "Are you inside my head?" he whispered. She gave no reply. Days passed, but the silence did not break. James began to notice small things. When he thought of his past, she blinked as if hearing him. When he felt pain, her eyes dimmed. It was as if a hidden bridge connected them, a bridge he did not understand. On the seventh night, James finally spoke again. "I don't know your name," he said. Still silence. But then, in the deep hours of night, he heard a sound, a whisper, broken and strange, not in human tongue, yet somehow he understood it. The alien woman lifted her head slowly and said, "We are not slaves." Her voice was weak, like an echo through glass. James sat up, his heart racing. She continued, her words struggling to form in broken English. "We are chosen." The chains around her wrists glowed faintly, the same glow. As her eyes, James stepped back, unsure if it was real or a dream. The air in the room grew heavy, and for the first time, James felt true fear, not of her, but of what she meant. Who was this woman? Why was she given to him? And what did she mean by chosen? As James stared into her glowing eyes, he realized one thing. This was not the end of the war. This was only the beginning. The alien woman did not speak again, not for days. She stayed in the corner of James's quarters, silent like a shadow. Her chains clinked when she moved, but most of the time she did not move at all. She sat still, watching him, her glowing eyes calm but unsettling. James tried to live normally, but nothing felt normal anymore. When he ate, she watched. When he read, she watched. When he slept, she watched. It was not the stare of an enemy, not the look of hate. It was something deeper, like she was studying him, learning him. He found himself speaking to her, even though she gave no answer. At first, it felt foolish, but slowly, it felt less lonely. One evening, James placed food in front of her again. "Eat," he said softly. "You must be hungry." She looked at the plate, then at him, but did not touch it. Frustration burned in him. "You'll die if you don't eat," but still, silence. That night, James dreamed again. He was standing on a field of red sand under a black sky. Strange towers rose in the distance. Glowing like fire, he heard a woman's voice echo in his mind. Not spoken, but felt. "Do not fear the bond." He turned and saw her, the alien woman, standing beside him without chains. Her eyes brighter than the stars. He reached out, but before he could touch her, the vision broke, and he woke in his bed. His heart pounded, and sweat covered his skin. He looked across the room. She was still there, sitting quietly in the corner. But her eyes were closed, as if she had seen the same dream. James began to wonder if she was inside his mind, if their thoughts had somehow crossed. When he felt anger, he noticed her eyes dim. When he felt calm, her eyes glowed faintly brighter. It was like an invisible thread pulled them together. A silent bond neither of them could escape. One day, James finally asked, "Who are you?" The woman lifted her head but gave no word. He tried again. "What do you want?" She blinked. Slowly, her lips parting just a little, but no sound came out. Instead, James heard something else, not through his ears, but inside his mind, a soft whisper, a thought that was not his own. "You hear me?" James froze, looking at her. "Yes," he whispered. "I hear you." The woman lowered her gaze, as if unsure whether to continue. James leaned closer. "Tell me your name." For a long moment, there was nothing, only silence. Then the whisper came again. "Lyra." The name was short, simple, yet it carried a strange weight. James repeated it softly. "Lyra." Her glowing eyes flickered, as if the sound of her name spoken by him gave her strength. From that day, things began to change. She did not speak with her mouth, but with her mind. Broken words and images that James could only partly understand. She showed him flashes of her world. Golden rivers, silver mountains, and skies with 3 suns, but also images of fire and chains, of her people forced to kneel before a shadow that swallowed stars. James felt her pain as if it were his own, and his anger burned against whoever had done this. At times, he tried to break the chains with his tools, but each time he touched them, they pulsed with light and heat. It was as if the chains were alive, guarding her, imprisoning her. Lyra only whispered, "Not yet." Whenever he tried, James did not understand what she meant, but he obeyed. The bond between them grew stronger sometimes. James would think of something simpler, cup of water, a piece of bread, and before he spoke, she moved her eyes toward it as if answering the thought. Sometimes he would feel sadness, and suddenly she would close her eyes, as if sharing the same burden. It frightened him, yet comforted him. He had never been so close to anyone, and yet he knew nothing about her. One evening, as the sun set outside, James found himself staring at Lyra longer than usual. The light touched her silver skin, and for the first time, she did not look like a prisoner. She looked otherworldly, almost royal. James felt something strange in his chest, a feeling he had not known since before the war. He shook it away, telling himself it was madness. That night, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, the dreams came again. But this time they were different. He stood on a battlefield of stars, ships burning, worlds falling, and in the center stood Lyra, unchained, her body glowing with energy. A voice filled his mind, her voice, but stronger than before. "You are part of this now. You cannot walk away," James gasped, trying to resist. But the vision held him. Lyra turned to him, her eyes blazing. "We are not slaves, James. We are chosen." James woke with a cry, sitting up in bed, his heart pounded, his breath ragged, across the room. Lyra opened her glowing eyes for the first time. She spoke aloud, her voice fragile but clear. "Do you believe me?" James stared at her, the weight of her words heavy on his chest. He did not know what to believe anymore, but deep inside, he knew one thing. This bond between them was not an accident. It was destiny, and it was only beginning. The nights grew heavier, and James no longer slept in peace. Every time he closed his eyes, dreams came, visions of places he had never seen, voices he had never heard, and battles far greater than the war on Earth, and always at the center of those visions was Lyra, the alien woman chained in his quarters. During the day, she was silent, calm, and watchful, but at night, in dreams, she was different. She stood unchained, powerful, glowing with strange light. She spoke words he barely understood, but his heart remembered them when he woke. One morning, James could no longer take it. He sat across from her, staring into her glowing eyes. "Why me?" he asked, his voice tired. "Why do I see these things? What are you doing to me?" For a long moment, Lyra said nothing. Then, in a whisper inside his mind, she answered, "You are marked." James frowned. "Marked? What does that mean?" Lyra slowly lifted her chained hands, turning her wrists so he could see. On her pale skin, near the base of her palm, was a faint mark, like a symbol burned into her flesh. James leaned closer, and as he did, his own arm began to tingle. He pulled up his sleeve, and his eyes widened. There, on his right arm, near his wrist, was the same mark, glowing faintly under his skin. He stumbled back, shocked. How? How is that possible? "I've never seen this before." Lyra's eyes dimmed, and her voice filled his head again. "You were chosen, long before this war. Long before you knew my people." James shook his head. "Chosen for what?" Her chains glowed softly, responding to her words, to join, to awaken, to stand against the shadow. The words chilled James to the bone. The shadow, he had seen it in his dreams. A vast darkness, swallowing stars, ships burning, worlds falling into silence. He remembered the fear that came with it, a fear deeper than death. James clenched his fists. "You're saying this war, the war we fought, it wasn't the real enemy?" Lyra lowered her gaze. "My people. We never wanted this war with humans. We were forced." Her voice grew heavy, broken. "The shadow binds worlds in chains. It whispers lies. It makes slaves of kings and soldiers alike." She raised her head, her glowing eyes fierce. "My chains are not only iron, they are part of that power. They keep me weak. They keep me silent." James's chest tightened. He thought back to the council, the way they had laughed, the way they had called her a prize, a token, but now, staring at her, he realized she was something else entirely. Not just a prisoner, not just an enemy, something much greater. "Why tell me this?" James asked, his voice softer now. Lyra leaned forward, her chained hands trembling. "Because the mark has chosen you too. James, we are bound by it. Your life is tied to mine." James felt his breath catch. Bound? With her, he wanted to deny. It too pushed it away, but the mark on his skin still glowed faintly, proving her words true. For the first time, James felt fear, not for Earth, but for himself. What happens if I refuse? If I walk away? Lyra closed her eyes, and her whisper was like cold wind. Then the shadow wins, and all will fall. Silence filled the room, broken only by the faint rattle of chains. James turned away, pacing. It was madness he was. A soldier, not some chosen savior. He had fought for Earth, but this was bigger than Earth. It was a war across the stars. When he looked back, Lyra was staring at him, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow and hope. He realized then that she was not asking him to fight for her. She was asking him to fight for both of them, for all who could not fight. James sat down slowly, rubbing the mark on his arm. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" he asked. Lyra's eyes softened, and she whispered only one word: trust. At that moment, the chains around her wrists pulsed with light, as if reacting to their bond. James reached out without thinking, his fingers brushing the glowing metal. A surge of energy burned through him, visions flashing in his mind. He saw Lyra's world again, beautiful and free, before the chains, before the shadow. He saw her people, proud and strong. And then he saw them fall. Their skies darkened, their cities broken, their spirits crushed. His heart ached with the weight of their suffering. He pulled his hand away, gasping for breath. Lyra's eyes shimmered with tears, though no tears fell. "Now you know," she whispered. James sat in silence for a long time, staring at the floor. Everything he thought he knew about the war, about victory, about freedom, all felt like lies now. He clenched his fists, anger boiling in his chest, but also fear. If what she said was true, then Earth was not safe. None of them were safe. Finally, he lifted his head, his voice low. "Then tell me everything." Lyra's glowing eyes locked on his, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. "The truth," she whispered, "will change you forever." The days that followed felt heavier for James. Every time he looked at the glowing mark on his arm, he remembered Lyra's words. "We are bound, we are chosen." The truth had shaken him, but what troubled him most was not the mark, not even the visions. It was the chains. The chains were not normal. They were alive. Sometimes at night, James heard them whisper, a faint metallic hum, as if they were breathing. Other times, they rattled on their own, even when Lyra sat perfectly still. He had seen machines in war. He had seen weapons built with alien power. But these chains were different. They were more than technology. They were like a curse. One evening, James sat across from her again, frustration burning in his chest. "You say you're not my enemy? Then why do these chains hold you? Not break free yourself." Lyra's glowing eyes softened, and her whisper touched his mind. "They are not only chains of iron, they are chains of fate, made to bind what I am, not only my body." James frowned. "And what are you?" Her eyes flickered with sadness. "Not what they told you, not what they gave you. Something more." Before James could reply, a loud knock came at his door. He opened it to find two soldiers standing with grim faces. "Commander Rylan," one of them said, "a word of warning. Keep that alien under control. She may look harmless, but her kind are dangerous. If you release her, you'll answer for it." James clenched his jaw, but said nothing. The soldiers smirked and walked away, their boots heavy on the floor. When James closed the door, he looked back at Lyra. Her eyes glowed faintly, and for the first time, he noticed something: fear. "Why are they so afraid of you?" he asked. Her answer was simple, whispered like a blade in the dark. "Because they know what happens if I am free." That night, James could not sleep. He tossed on his bed, the sound of the chains rattling in his ears. Then suddenly, a loud crack filled the room. He sat up, heart pounding. The chains were moving, twisting like snakes, glowing brighter than before. Lyra gasped, falling to her knees. Her body trembling, James rushed forward, grabbing her shoulders. "What's happening?" Her voice filled his mind, broken, desperate. "They know. The shadow knows. The seal is waking." The chains tightened around her wrists, leaving marks on her skin. James tried to pull them off, but a surge of energy threw him back against the wall. The air filled with a sharp hum, as if the chains were alive and angry. Lyra cried out in pain, and the glow from her eyes spread across her body. James stumbled to his feet, fear clashing with determination. He couldn't just watch. He had to choose. Was this a trap, or was it her truth? "Tell me what to do," he shouted. Lyra's eyes locked on his, glowing like fire. "Break them," she whispered, "or I die." James hesitated, his mind racing. The soldier's warning echoed in his ears. "If you release her, you'll answer for it." What if this was the trap they feared? What if freeing her meant destroying everything he had fought to protect? But then he saw her face twisted in pain, the chains burning into her flesh. He remembered her words, her visions, her truth, and he made his choice. James grabbed the chain at her wrist, ignoring the heat that scorched his skin. His mark began to glow brighter, answering the light of the chains. Pain tore through him, but he held on, pulling with every ounce of strength. The room shook, sparks flying, the chains screaming like living creatures with one final pull. The chain snapped. A blinding light filled the room, throwing James to the ground. When he looked up, Lyra was free. The chains lay broken on the floor, glowing faintly before turning black like dead metal. Lyra collapsed forward, gasping for breath. Her hands trembling, James rushed to her, lifting her gently. "Are you all right?" She opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time, her voice came not only in his mind, but out loud, fragile, but clear. "Thank you." But before relief could settle, the room darkened. The air grew heavy, the lights flickered, and outside, alarms began to wail. James ran to the window, his heart dropping. In the night sky above the city, strange shadows moved ships, dark and silent, unlike anything human. Lyra pulled herself up, her glowing eyes sharp with fear. "They have found us," she whispered. James turned to her, confusion and dread mixing in his chest. Who found us?" Lyra's answer was a single word, but it carried the weight of doom. The shadow, the chains had not only been her prison, they had been a lock, a seal, and by breaking them, James had opened the door. He turned back to the window, watching the dark ships draw closer. The war was not over. It was only beginning. The alarms continued to scream through the city. Red lights flashed across the windows, and the hum of engines filled the air. James stood frozen as dark shapes moved across the night sky ships. Massive and silent, blocking out the stars, they were nothing like human ships. Their surfaces seemed to drink the light around them. It was as if the darkness itself had grown wings and descended upon Earth. Behind him, Lyra struggled to stand, her hands free but trembling. Her glowing eyes reflected the ships outside. "They have come sooner than I feared," she whispered, her voice both tired and sharp. James turned toward her, anger and fear boiling inside him. "You knew this would happen. You knew freeing you would bring them here?" Lyra lowered her head. "The chains kept me hidden, but they also kept me dying. If you had not broken them, I would already be gone." James's chest tightened, torn between guilt and relief. He could not imagine letting her die. Not after everything he had seen in his dreams. Not after everything she had whispered into his mind. But now the danger was real, and the sky outside proved it. A sudden boom shook the building, glass rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. James grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her away from the window. Move. They'll target us next. Together, they ran down the corridor. The sound of distant explosions echoing through the city. Soldiers shouted outside, vehicles roared past, but James knew none of them understood what was coming. As they reached the lower levels of the barracks, James stopped. Lyra was breathing heavily, her body still weak from years of chains. James looked at her, frustration in his eyes. You have to tell me the truth, all of it. What are they? What do they want? Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and she placed her hand over the faint mark on James's arm. Her voice echoed inside his head, strong and steady. They are the shadow. They are not one race, not one people, but a hunger that binds all it touches. Worlds fall to them, not by choice, but by chains. My people were their victims, just as yours will be. James's fists clenched. So this war we fought, it was never about us. Lyra nodded. It was a distraction. They pit worlds against each other, weaken them, and when both are broken, the shadow takes what is left. The ground shook again, and James realized time was slipping away. He pulled her closer. Then, how do we fight them? How do we stop this? Lyra closed her eyes, and when she spoke again, her words sent a chill through him, by awakening what I am. And what you are? James frowned. What I am? I'm just a soldier. Lyra shook her head. No. You carry the mark the same as me. It means your soul is linked to mine. Together, we are more than soldier and prisoner. We are a bond of shadow fears. Before James could argue, the ceiling above them cracked and debris rained down. A black, drone-like machine crashed through. The wall, its body twisted like living shadow. Red lights glowing where its eyes should be. It screeched, a sound that cut into James's skull, and lunged toward them. James pulled his weapon and fired. Bullets tearing into the creature, but it only slowed, not stopped. The drone's limbs reached out, sharp like blades. James braced for impact. But Lyra stepped forward, raising her free hand. Her eyes blazed with white fire, the mark on her wrist glowed, and for a heartbeat, James felt his own mark burn in response. A surge of energy burst from Lyra's hand. Slamming into the drone, the creature screamed, its body twisting violently before it collapsed into ash. James stared in shock, his weapon still raised. Did you do that? Lyra's chest heaved, sweat glistening on her silver skin. Yes, she whispered, but not alone. Your mark gave me strength. We are one in this. James looked down at his arm, the mark glowing faintly. He had felt it tooth a surge. The power, the strange unity, it terrified him. But at the same time, it awakened something inside him. He could not explain. More explosions shook the city outside, and the air smelled of smoke and burning metal. James grabbed Lyra's hand, her skin warm with energy. Then we fight together, he said, his voice steady now. Lyra's glowing eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no sorrow in the lonely resolve. But even as they prepared to move, Lyra's expression darkened. The shadow will not stop. That drone was only a scout. Soon, the full force will come. And when they do, they will demand what was chained. James frowned. They'll demand you. Lyra nodded. And if Earth gives me back, your world will fall as mine did. The words struck James harder than any battle wound. He had fought for medals, for victories, for flags. But now, for the first time, he understood the true cost freedom itself, and he knew, deep inside, that he would never give her back, no matter what. Another blast shook the building. Closer this time, James pulled Lyra to her feet. His jaw tight, his decision clear. Veil? Have to go through me first, he said. Lyra's glowing eyes softened, her voice barely a whisper. They will. And in that moment, James realized something he had never felt in all his years of war. He was not fighting for Earth alone. He was fighting for her, for them, for a bond stronger than chains. The awakening had begun. The city burned through the night. Flames rose against the dark sky as sirens cried across the streets. The ships of the shadow hung above the clouds, silent, unmoving, like predators circling prey. No one in the city had ever seen such things. Yet everyone knew they were not human, and they were not here for peace. James led Lyra through broken alleys, avoiding patrols of frightened soldiers. The army was preparing weapons, tanks, and aircraft. But James knew they would be useless. He had seen what a single drone had done. The shadow was something far greater, and Lyra was the reason they had come at dawn. A sound filled the sky, a voice that was not a voice, a vibration that sank into bone. The people stopped where they stood, clutching their ears. Screens across the city flickered on, though no one had touched them. The image was black at first. Then a shape appeared, a figure cloaked in shadow. Its face hidden, only two red lights glowing where eyes should be. The voice spoke, cold and hollow. "People of Earth, you hold what is ours. Return the chained one, and we will spare your world." James froze, his breath caught. Every word felt like ice in his veins. The people around him stared at the screens in horror. A chained one, that was Lyra. The shadow knew she was free. And they had come to take her back. Lyra stood beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the image. She whispered into his mind, her voice sharp with fear. "They will not spare your world. It is a lie. They never leave what they touch. If they take me, they will break you next." The figure on the screen continued. "You have one cycle of your sun to decide. Refuse, and your world will burn. Obey, and you will live." The screen went dark, but the silence it left was louder than any scream. That day, the Council of Earth gathered in the Great Hall. Leaders, generals, scientists all spoke with fear. In their voices, James stood among them, Lyra hidden under a cloak at his side. One general slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot fight them. You saw their ships. If they want the alien, give her to them." Murmurs of agreement spread across the hall. Another leader added, "It is one life for billions. A simple choice." James's fists clenched, anger rising in his chest. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "She is not their slave. She is not their property. If you give her back, Earth will not survive. They will take her. Then they will take everything." The council leader glared at him. "And how do you know this, Commander Rylan?" "From her whispers, from her glowing eyes. She is their kind." "How do we know she does not speak lies?" James looked at Lyra, her silver skin hidden by the cloak. She raised her head slowly, her glowing eyes visible beneath the hood. "They chained me, just as they will chain you. If you return me, you sign your own death," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear. The hall fell silent, but the silence was heavy with doubt. Then a scientist spoke, his voice cautious. "If she truly holds power, perhaps she is our only weapon. But if she lies, then we hand ourselves to destruction." The council leader leaned back, his eyes cold. "Then let us test her." That night, in a hidden chamber, James and Lyra were brought before a group of generals. They demanded, "Lyra, show her power." James stepped close, whispering, "You don't have to." But Lyra lifted her hands. Her mark, glowing. A sphere of light formed between her palms, pulsing like a star. The room filled with warmth, the air alive with energy. The generals gasped, some in awe, some in fear. When the light faded, Lyra fell weak, her body trembling. James caught her, holding her close. The generals whispered among themselves, fear in their eyes. "She is too dangerous." One hissed, "Too powerful," said another. The council leader's voice cut through the whispers. "Then we have our answer." We cannot risk keeping her. At dawn, she is to be delivered to the shadow. James's blood ran cold. He shouted, "No, you'll kill us all if you do this." But soldiers stepped forward, pulling him away. Lyra reached for him, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow. Her voice echoed in his mind, soft but desperate. "Do not let them take me. If they do, it ends for everyone." That night, James sat in his quarters, his hands bound by duty and chains of his own. He thought of the war he had fought, of the medals he never cared about, and now he thought of Lyra, the woman they called a slave. The woman he knew was something far greater. The mark on his arm glowed faintly, as if calling him to choose, escape, or obey. Outside, the shadow ships waited in silence. Inside, James's heart raged like fire. He knew what the council would do, and he knew what he had to do when the sun rose. Earth would hand her over, unless he stopped them. The sun rose red over the broken city. Its light touched the towers of smoke. The streets filled with fear, and the sky where the shadow ships waited like hunters above their prey. The council had spoken. Their choice clear Lyra would be given. Back, one life for billions. A simple trade, they said. But James knew it was no trade at all. It was surrender. Soldiers came at dawn. Marching with cold faces and hard boots, they entered James's quarters, where Lyra sat chained again, not by her will, but by theirs. Her glowing eyes looked at him, calm but filled with sorrow. She did not beg, she did not cry, she only whispered into his mind, "Do not hate them, they are blind, not evil. But if they deliver me, earth will fall." James stood, his fists tight. "You are not going anywhere," he said, his voice low but steady. The soldiers moved forward, reaching for her. James blocked their path, his hand on his weapon. "You'll take her over my dead body." For a tense moment, silence filled the room. Then one soldier spat, "You would betray your world for her." James's jaw clenched, his voice fierce. "No, I would save my world by keeping her free. You fools are walking us into chains." The soldiers hesitated, but orders were orders. They raised their weapons. James moved first, striking one across the face, grabbing Lyra's hand and pulling her toward the back door. The mark on his arm blazed with light, answering hers. Energy surged between them, and for a moment the soldiers were thrown back as if struck by an invisible wave. Together, James and Lyra ran through the burning city. The shadow ships stirred above, their red lights searching. Every street was chaos, families fleeing, soldiers shouting, alarms screaming. But James had only one goal: keep Lyra from their hands. They reached the outskirts, where rubble and ruins hid them from view. James stopped, gasping for breath. Lyra stood beside him, weak but resolute. "You should have left me," she whispered, her voice trembling. James turned, his eyes fierce. "I fought wars for flags, for councils, for orders I did not believe in, but you, I'll fight for you, because you are worth it." Her glowing eyes softened, and for the first time she smiled a fragile, beautiful smile. The bond between them was no longer just chains of fate. It was choice, it was trust, it was something deeper. But the moment shattered as the ground shook. A beam of red light struck nearby, melting stone and steel. The shadow had found them. From the sky, black figures descended, drones. Dozens of them, their limbs sharp like blades, their eyes burning red. James raised his weapon, firing, shouting. Lyra stepped forward, lifting her hands. The mark on her wrist glowed brighter than ever before. Her voice echoed in his mind, strong and steady, together. The bond between them surged like fire. James felt her strength flow into him, and his courage filled her. Energy burst from her hands, cutting through the drones like lightning. James's bullets struck with uncanny precision, guided by the connection they shared. The battlefield became a storm of fire and light. And for the first time, the shadow faltered. But then, the great ship above the city opened. A beam of darkness fell, swallowing light itself. From the beam, a massive figure descended, cloaked in shadow, taller than any human, its body shifting like smoke and steel. Its voice thundered through the air, "You dare resist us. You dare keep what is ours." James felt his knees weaken under the weight of its presence, but Lyra stepped forward, her body glowing like a star. "I was never yours," she said, her voice steady, "and I never will be." The figure reached out, shadowed hands stretching toward her. James grabbed her hand, their marks burning together. Energy surged, brighter than before. The shadow roared, staggering back as the light pierced its darkness. The sky split with fire, the ships above shaking as the bond between James and Lyra unleashed its full power. The people of Earth looked up, their fear turning to awe as the dark ships faltered, retreating into the void. The shadow's voice echoed one last time, filled with rage. "This is not the end. We will return. And when we do, your world will kneel." Then, like smoke in the wind, the figure vanished. The ships pulling back into the depths of space. The city fell silent, the alarms fading. The shadow was gone. For now, James sank to his knees, exhausted. Lyra knelt beside him, her glowing eyes soft. "You chose me," she whispered. James smiled weakly. "No, I chose us." In the weeks that followed, Earth rebuilt. The Council could no longer deny what had happened. The shadow was real. And so was Lyra, no longer a prisoner, no longer a slave. She walked freely among humans, her glowing eyes a symbol of hope. And James stayed by her side. The bond they shared was no longer just survival. It was love. On a quiet evening, under the same red sun that had once risen over war, James held Lyra's hands. No chains, no council. Number shadow only, a promise. "I fought for medals, for flags, for orders," he said softly. "But now I fight for you. Not as a commander, not as a soldier, but as a man." He placed a simple ring on her finger, not a chain, not a shackle. A circle of choice, of freedom, of love. Her glowing eyes shimmered as she whispered, "They gave you a slave, but you found a queen." And in that moment, the story of war ended, and the story of forever began.